Elias was a simple man in an extraordinary world. He didn't wear armor like the warriors or speak in the grandiose manner of the royal advisors. He wasn't a diplomat, nor was he part of the military force that protected the queen. Elias was an engineer, a builder, and a fixer of things. In a galaxy where empires were born and broken by power, Elias was a humble cog in the grand machinery of the royal palace. The palace was a place of grandeur. Its walls were made of glowing metals that shimmered like liquid gold under the station's artificial lights. Towers stretched high into the air, supported by massive columns that seemed to defy gravity. The queen's chambers, where Elias had been assigned for the day, were the most luxurious in the entire empire. The bed in the room alone was enough to make anyone gasp. Made from a rare material that looked like starlight, it was covered in silk sheets that looked soft enough to melt into. But it was broken, and that was where Elias came in. He had been called to the queen's quarters to repair the bed, a task that sounded simple enough for someone of his skills. Yet, as he entered the room, the weight of the surroundings made him pause. Everything about the room was regal and daunting. The high ceilings, the delicate crystal chandeliers, the murals of distant stars and ancient battles. Elias felt out of place. He wasn't used to working in spaces like this, surrounded by so much wealth and power. But that was the way it was in the palace. Wealth and power existed in abundance, and those like Elias were there to keep everything running smoothly. The queen's bed had been damaged during a strange energy surge that had swept through the palace the day before. The energy had caused the metallic structure of the bed to malfunction, and now it refused to retract into its hidden storage compartment. Elias was here to fix it. He set his tools down carefully beside the bed and began inspecting the problem. As he worked, the quiet of the room settled around him. There were no sounds of the bustling palace, no whispers of political intrigue or the constant churning of royal decisions. It was just Elias and the bed. He knew that most people would have been in awe of the surroundings. The walls, the view of the stars through the large windows, but Elias had seen this kind of luxury before. It didn't faze him. It was just another job. He bent over the bed, tightening a few bolts and making minor adjustments, when the soft sound of footsteps caught his attention. Elias straightened, instinctively looking up from his work. Standing in the doorway was the queen herself, Queen Alara. Her presence filled the room, even without a word. She was tall, regal, with eyes as dark as the deepest corners of space. Her long hair cascaded down her back in silver waves, and her attire shimmered with the elegance of her royal lineage. She was the ruler of a vast empire, one that stretched across many star systems. To many, she was a goddess, a symbol of strength, beauty, and untouchable power. But to Elias, she was just another person. She walked into the room with a grace that seemed effortless, her gaze falling on him without a hint of surprise. Elias stood up, suddenly feeling as though he had been caught doing something wrong, though he knew he hadn't. "You are the engineer assigned to fix my bed?" Queen Alara asked, her voice calm and steady, with a subtle warmth that surprised him. "Yes, Your Majesty," Elias replied, bowing his head slightly in respect. He wasn't sure how to address her. His position didn't require such formalities, but this was different. He could feel the weight of her title in the air. The queen's eyes flicked over the bed for a moment, and Elias felt a sudden rush of nerves. Was she dissatisfied with his work? Was there something he had missed? He hoped he had done it right. The queen's gaze met his once again. "I appreciate your service," she said, her tone softening. "But you must know, many would find it a great honor to be in your position." "You are in the presence of the queen herself." Elias nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. He was just a human, one of many, who had been called to this place to fix things. He wasn't used to being recognized or praised. In fact, he had never expected to be in the queen's presence at all. "I don't consider it an honor," he replied honestly, almost too bluntly. "It's just a job." Queen Alara raised an eyebrow. the faintest hint of a smile playing on her lips. "You do not see your work as something greater than that?" she asked, stepping closer to him. Elias hesitated, unsure how to answer. It wasn't that he didn't take pride in his work. It was just that he didn't see it in the same light as others might. Fixing a bed, repairing a machine, building a structure. They were all necessary things, sure, but they were just parts of a bigger picture. "I do my best," Elias said, shrugging slightly. "But in the end, it's just what I'm good at. It doesn't matter who I'm working for." The Queen seemed to study him for a moment, as if considering his words carefully. She crossed the room and stopped beside the bed. The glow from the room's lights shimmered against her silver hair, making her look almost ethereal. Elias tried not to stare, but there was something about her presence that made it hard to look away. "You have a strange way of looking at the world, Elias," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Most would see the honor in being close to the Queen, in serving the Empire. But you see only the task in front of you." "I suppose so," Elias replied. He wasn't sure what else to say. He had never been good with words, especially not around someone as powerful as the Queen. The Queen's smile widened just slightly, as if amused by his straightforwardness. She seemed to enjoy the simplicity of his response, perhaps because it was so different from the usual flattery she received from her courtiers. "You are a rare one, Elias," she said, turning her attention back to the bed. "Most would fall all over themselves trying to impress me, but you simply do your job." "I don't see the point in pretending," Elias answered, feeling a little bolder now. "I'm here to fix your bed, not to win favor." There was a long pause. The Queen seemed to be lost in thought for a moment, and Elias wondered if he had overstepped. He knew he should probably leave the room, but something about the Queen's presence made him want to stay a little longer. After what felt like an eternity, Queen Alara looked back at him, her gaze softer now. "You are different," she said, almost to herself. "Most people are afraid of me, but you seem unbothered by my presence." Elias wasn't sure what to say to that. He had never been one to fear royalty. Power didn't scare him. People were just people, no matter their title. "I'm not afraid of you," he said simply. For a moment, there was silence. Then the Queen stepped closer, her eyes locking with his. It was the first time he truly felt the weight of her gaze, the intensity of someone who commanded the respect of entire worlds. She didn't speak, but something about the way she looked at him made Elias's heart race. The room felt smaller, more intimate, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. "I suppose you are right, Queen Alara," said finally, breaking the silence. "You are not like the others." Elias wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a criticism, but it made him feel strangely light inside. He had always been just a worker, someone who fixed things. But in that moment, he felt like something more. Someone who had earned the Queen's notice, if only for a brief moment. With a final glance, the Queen turned and walked toward the door. "You may finish your work, Elias," she said, her voice gentle. "I'll be leaving you to it." As she left the room, Elias returned to his task, but something had shifted. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. He was just a man, and yet, in the presence of the Queen, he felt something else. Something beyond the simple job he had been given. The following days felt strange for Elias. He had repaired the Queen's bed, yes. But it was not the task itself that lingered in his mind. It was her presence. The soft way she spoke, and the way she seemed to study him with her dark eyes. There was something different about her, a loneliness that even the grand palace could not hide. He had noticed it during the brief moments they shared, but he couldn't quite place it. Elias tried to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the Queen. Her eyes, calm yet filled with depth, had left an impression on him. They were not like the eyes of others he had worked with. the aristocrats and military leaders who only saw him as a tool to be used. Queen Alara had looked at him differently, like she was trying to understand him. Most rulers did not have time for the likes of him. He found himself back in the palace corridors more often, repairing small systems, adjusting energy readings, and fixing malfunctioning devices. Every time he walked past the queen's chambers, he felt his heart beat faster. He wasn't sure why. It wasn't as though she had asked him for anything more than the repairs. Yet, there was a sense that she was watching him, waiting for something. It was during one of these ordinary days that she called for him again. This time, it wasn't about the bed or any equipment malfunction. The queen had sent for him specifically, and that was an unusual request. He was used to being given tasks, but being summoned by the queen herself, that felt different. Elias arrived at her chambers, his heart beating a little faster than usual. When the door opened, he found her standing in the center of the room, her back straight, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You came," she said simply, her voice warm but not demanding. "I wanted to ask you something." Elias nodded, unsure of what to expect. He had repaired things for her before, but this felt different. He followed her into the room, feeling the weight of the queen's gaze on him again. "I've been watching you," she said after a brief pause. "I've had many people in and out of these halls, nobles, warriors, ambassadors. They all come with their agendas. But you are different." Elias wasn't sure how to respond. He wasn't used to people, let alone the queen, saying such things. "I'm just a fixer," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I just do my job. Do you?" she asked, stepping closer to him, her eyes narrowing with interest. "You do it well. But I've been wondering, what is it that makes you so different? Why do you not seek favor or recognition like the others?" Elias had to think about this for a moment. The truth was, he had never been interested in pleasing anyone. Growing up, he had learned that survival depended on doing the work that needed doing. Nothing more, nothing less. He was used to being a shadow in the background, unnoticed by the rest of the world. "I suppose I don't care for recognition," he said at last.
"I do what's needed, and that's enough for me. I don't need praise, and I don't need titles."
"I just want to do my part." The queen studied him, her expression thoughtful. "That's an interesting perspective," she said slowly. "Most would crave the power, the wealth, the influence. You seem content with the simplest of things." Elias could see the curiosity in her eyes, a spark of something deeper than mere politeness. He didn't know how to answer her. The queen was so far removed from the life he led, and yet she seemed genuinely intrigued by his perspective. There was a moment of silence before she spoke again, her voice softer now. "Tell me, Elias, do you believe that the world, this galaxy, is as it should be?" He blinked, surprised by the question. "What do you mean? Do you think it is right that some have power while others serve them?" she asked. "Do you think it is right that I, as a queen, rule over countless worlds, while others live in poverty and despair?" Elias hesitated, unsure of what to say. It wasn't his place to challenge the way things were. The queen ruled, and that was how the galaxy worked. But as he stood there, in the presence of this woman who seemed so burdened by her title, he began to wonder if there was more to her question than he had first realized. I think that maybe power should be shared," he said slowly. "I don't know if it's right for one person to have all the control. Maybe there's a better way for people to live together, to share responsibility."
The queen's lips curled into a small smile. "That's what I thought," she said.
"You have an interesting way of looking at the galaxy?" Elias was taken aback. "I didn't mean to offend you, Your Majesty." "I am just... No, she interrupted, raising a hand to stop him. "You didn't offend me." "I admire your honesty. Most would be afraid to speak such thoughts aloud, but you speak freely. You remind me of something I once believed." Elias was puzzled. What do you mean? The queen's expression became distant, as though lost in a memory. When I first came to power, I had dreams of a galaxy united, where power was not hoarded but shared. But as the years passed, I learned that power corrupts. It's too easy to lose sight of what's important when you have everything. Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, there was an uncomfortable silence. Elias could sense that the queen was struggling with something deep within her. She wasn't just the ruler of an empire. She was a woman, burdened with a weight no one else could understand. I don't want to be like the others, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to roll with fear, with the constant pressure to control everything around me. But I don't know how to change it. Elias felt something stir inside him, something unexpected. Where did you get it now? He had always seen royalty as untouchable, as distant figures who cared only for their own interests. But Queen Alara was different. She was human, just like him, with doubts, fears, and desires. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but the words didn't come. Instead, he simply nodded, acknowledging the pain in her eyes. She didn't ask for his pity, but she had allowed him a glimpse into her heart, a heart that had been hardened by years of ruling, yet still carried a flicker of hope.
I think, Elias said quietly, that maybe you're already starting to change things, just by being honest with yourself.
The queen looked at him, a glimmer of something like gratitude in her gaze. Perhaps, she said softly. Perhaps. The rest of the conversation passed in a blur, but the tension between them had shifted. There was no longer the barrier of royalty and servant, no longer the distance that had once separated them. Now, they were just two people, two souls who had found a moment of understanding in the midst of the chaos around them. As Elias left her chambers, he felt a strange sense of clarity. He wasn't sure where this path would lead, or what it would mean for him and the queen. But for the first time, he felt that his presence here mattered, that he, too, had a role to play in something much bigger than himself. The days following their conversation were quiet, yet filled with an unspoken tension. Elias found himself thinking more and more about the queen. She had been different with him, and something about that honesty, something about the way she had opened up to him, lingered in his thoughts. He wasn't sure if it was admiration or something else, but he knew that something had changed. It wasn't just her that had changed. Elias noticed that the way people looked at him had subtly shifted too. Whispers followed him as he passed the palace corridors. The nobles, the guards, and even the other workers seemed to look at him differently. He wasn't sure if it was because of his association with the queen, or because his interactions with her had made him somehow more significant. But despite the newfound attention, Elias kept to his work. It was all he knew, all he had ever known. The world of politics, power struggles, and court intrigues was something he had never been part of. He wasn't even sure he wanted to be part of it. His job was simple: fix things, make sure the machines ran smoothly, keep everything working as it should. And yet, every time he walked past the queen's chambers, his heart would beat a little faster. He couldn't deny it. There was something about her that stirred him. Something beyond her beauty, beyond her power. It was something deeper, something human. One evening, as he made his way down a hallway after finishing his latest task, a soft voice called his name. Elias. He turned to see Queen Alara standing in the doorway of her chambers, her expression unreadable. There was something different about the way she looked at him now, a familiarity, a warmth that hadn't been there before.
You wanted to see me, Your Majesty?
Elias asked, his voice steady, though his heart raced. She nodded.
Please, come in. I have something I want to discuss with you. Elias stepped into the room, the door closing softly behind him.
The queen was standing by a large window, looking out at the stars. The soft glow of the starlight bathed her in an almost ethereal light. She was beautiful, but there was something more about her tonight, a vulnerability that he hadn't noticed before. I've been thinking, she said, her voice quiet, almost hesitant, about what we talked about the other day. Aaliyah stayed silent, unsure of what to say. He didn't want to push her, but he couldn't ignore the way she was looking at him, almost as though she was searching for something in his face. I've been told, she continued, that power is everything. That a queen must rule with strength and fear. That weakness will bring ruin. But I don't believe that anymore. Elias didn't respond right away. He had always seen the queen as untouchable, as someone who didn't question her role, her place in the galaxy. But now, hearing her words, he could sense the conflict within her. I don't want to be a queen who rules through fear, she said, turning to face him fully now. But I'm trapped in my own position. The expectations, the politics. There's no room for anything else. I'm constantly surrounded by people who want to use me, manipulate me for their own gain. And I've spent so long trying to play the part, trying to meet their expectations, that I've lost sight of who I really am. Elias felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had never imagined the queen feeling this way, never thought that someone so powerful could feel so trapped. He didn't know what to say, but he could see the pain in her eyes, the weight she carried. Your Majesty, you've done more for this galaxy than anyone could imagine, he said softly. You've brought peace, you've brought prosperity, but that doesn't mean you have to be everything to everyone. The queen's gaze softened. You're right, she said quietly. I've spent so much time trying to live up to others' expectations that I forgot what I really want. I want freedom, Elias. I want to be able to make my own choices without the pressure of being a symbol. There was a long silence between them, filled only by the distant hum of the palace and the faint sound of the stars beyond the window. Elias could feel the tension in the room, the weight of her words, the heaviness of her heart. He knew what she needed, but he wasn't sure he could offer it. Suddenly, the queen stepped closer to him, her eyes locking onto his. The room felt smaller now, the distance between them closing with every step she took. Elias's breath caught in his throat. The queen, the powerful ruler of countless worlds, was standing so close, looking at him with an intensity that he had never seen before. I've never met anyone like you, Elias, she whispered. You've been nothing but kind to me. You've never asked for anything in return. You've never tried to manipulate me or use me for your own gain. And that, she paused, taking a deep breath. That means more to me than you could ever know. Elias didn't know what to say. He felt a surge of emotions inside him, surprise, confusion, and something else, something he hadn't expected. He had always seen the queen as a distant figure, a ruler far beyond his reach. But now, in this moment, she was just a woman, standing before him, vulnerable and open.
I don't know what to do, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to change things.
But I want to try. I want to do better, and I want you to help me. Elias's heart was pounding in his chest. He didn't know what she was asking of him, or what he could possibly offer her, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes, the rawness in her expression. This wasn't just the queen speaking to him. It was Alara, the woman who had been buried beneath the weight of her title for so long. Before he could respond, before he could find the words, the queen reached out and gently cupped his face in her hands. Elias froze, his breath catching in his throat. He had never been this close to her before, never felt the warmth of her touch. He didn't know what was happening, but it felt like everything in the universe had paused, leaving only the two of them in this room. And then, without warning, the queen leaned in and kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as though she was testing the waters. Elias stood still, his mind racing, unsure of how to react. He had never imagined this, never thought that a moment like this could happen. But, as the queen's lips lingered on his, something inside him stirred. He responded, slowly at first, then with more certainty, his hands coming up to rest on her waist. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to stretch on. And in that moment, Elias felt everything else fade away. The palace, the galaxy, the expectations of the universe. It was just him and the Queen, sharing something they both needed, something neither of them had expected. When the kiss finally broke, they both stood there, breathless, their foreheads resting together. The Queen's eyes were wide, her face flushed, and Elias could see the vulnerability in her expression. "I never expected this," Elias whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The Queen smiled, a small, sad smile. "Neither did I," she replied softly. But sometimes, the unexpected is what we need most. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as though they had both crossed an invisible line, and now there was no turning back. Elias knew that this moment would change everything. The Queen, who had been untouchable to him before, was now someone he could no longer look at the same way. She had kissed him. No, more than that. She had trusted him in a way that no one else ever had. And Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The kiss had changed everything. Elias had never imagined that one moment would alter the course of his life. But now, standing in the Queen's chambers, everything felt different. He wasn't sure what had come over him, or what had come over her. But the closeness they shared was undeniable, and it was something neither of them could ignore. The Queen, Alara, had pulled away first, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. There was an awkwardness in the air, a quiet tension that hung between them. Elias could feel it, could see it in her eyes. She was unsure of what to say, unsure of what this moment meant, and Elias was no different. But there was something deep inside him that told him this was just the beginning. The kiss had cracked open something that neither of them could ignore, and the path ahead would be complicated. But it was also something that neither of them could walk away from. The Queen looked at him for a long moment, her gaze intense and searching, as though she was trying to understand the feelings that swirled between them. Elias didn't know what to say, so he said nothing, allowing her to speak when she was ready. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she broke the silence. "Elias, I don't know what to make of this," she said quietly. Her voice was soft but filled with a strength that was impossible to ignore. "I don't know what this means for us, for the galaxy, for anything."
Elias took a deep breath. "Neither do I," he admitted, his voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside him.
"But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to have all the answers right now." The Queen nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. She took a step back, as if to put some space between them, and Elias felt the coolness of the air return as she distanced herself. "I never wanted to be a queen who ruled with fear, Elias," she said, her voice tinged with a sadness that he hadn't expected. "But the weight of this crown, of this empire, it has made me do things I never thought I would."
Elias understood. He knew that power had a way of twisting people, changing their priorities.
The Queen had spent her entire life shaping her image, upholding the expectations of her people and the galaxy. It wasn't easy to break free from that, to find a new path. But Elias had never seen her as a ruler alone. To him, she was still a person, a woman who had been forced into a role that she had never fully chosen.
"You don't have to do this alone," Elias said quietly. He took a step toward her, but stopped short of reaching out.
He didn't want to push her, but he wanted her to know that he was there. "I don't know how I can help, but I'll be here for whatever you need." The Queen's eyes softened at his words. She seemed to consider his offer for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the floor as if she were wrestling with her own thoughts.
"You've already helped more than you know," she said softly.
"You've shown me that it's possible to trust again. I've been so closed off, so afraid to let anyone in. But with you, I feel like I can breathe." Elias didn't know how to respond to that. He had never imagined that his simple actions, his willingness to listen, to speak honestly, to be there for her, would have such an impact on someone as powerful as the Queen. But in that moment, he realized that maybe it wasn't about grand gestures or declarations of loyalty. Maybe it was just about being present, about offering something real in a world that so often felt artificial. "You don't have to be afraid," Elias said, his voice gentle. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I just want to help you find a way to live the life you want. You don't have to carry the weight of the galaxy alone." The Queen's expression softened, her lips curling into a small but genuine smile. "And you think I can find that life after everything I've done, after everything that's happened?" Elias nodded. "I believe you can. It won't be easy, but you don't have to do it alone." For the first time in what seemed like forever, the Queen allowed herself to relax, just slightly. She took a deep breath, as if releasing the weight of the entire galaxy from her shoulders, if only for a moment. "Thank you, Elias," she whispered. "I never thought I could trust anyone again, but you've shown me that there's still hope." There was a long pause between them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they were just two people in the same room. No titles, no expectations, no barriers between them. The world outside the palace, the galaxy, the Empire, they all seemed distant in that moment. What mattered was the trust that had been built between them. Fragile, but real. As the evening wore on, they continued to talk, quietly, about everything and nothing. They spoke about their fears, their hopes, their dreams for the future, things they had never allowed themselves to share with anyone else. It felt strange, almost surreal, to be this open, but it was also liberating. For the first time, the Queen spoke of her doubts about the Empire, the burden of her title, and the expectations placed on her. She spoke of the loneliness that had come with being a ruler, the way people had always looked at her as a symbol, not as a person. Elias listened, offering his thoughts when he could, but mostly just being there for her in a way that no one else had ever been. And as the night wore on, the bond between them grew stronger than it had ever been before. The next day, things felt different. The palace, with all its grandeur and wealth, seemed less imposing now. Elias walked through the halls with a sense of purpose, his steps steady and sure. He knew that the Queen's journey toward freedom, toward reclaiming her humanity, would not be easy. There would be challenges ahead, political opposition, threats from outside forces, and her own internal battles. But for the first time, Elias felt that she was not alone in that fight. The Queen was different too. There was a lightness in her step, a strength in the way she carried herself. The weight of the crown was still there, but it no longer seemed as heavy. She had found someone she could trust, someone who saw her as more than just a queen. And that, Elias thought, was the first step toward real change. As the days passed, Elias and the Queen continued to talk, continued to share their thoughts and their dreams. They worked together, finding ways to bring about the changes they both wanted. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every conversation, every moment they shared, brought them closer. And then, one day, after weeks of planning, the Queen made a decision. "I'm going to announce a new direction for the Empire," she said, her voice filled with determination. "It's time to change the way we do things. We'll share power, not hoard it. We'll work together, not fight against each other. It's time for a new beginning."
Elias couldn't help but smile. "I think that's the best decision you could make."
The Queen looked at him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Elias." And in that moment, Elias knew that he had played a part in something much bigger than himself. It wasn't about being a hero or gaining recognition. It was about helping someone find their true self and giving them the strength to change the world. And as the Queen took her first steps toward a new era, Elias knew that this was just the beginning. Together, they would rebuild a galaxy that had forgotten the value of trust, compassion, and hope.